you. Hello, welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about reincarnation and the fear of death. So just a few facts on reincarnation. In the world, it's estimated that about 1.4 billion people believe in reincarnation. So that's about 19% of the world population. And obviously it runs as a thread through the Buddhist and the Hindu belief systems. It was written about in the New Testament until the time of Constantine, when the Romans decided to censor it out. Okay, and it's Jesus spoke to the apostles and asked them if they remembered John the Baptist as Elijah. Which obviously Elijah had been alive about 900 years previous. So it suggested that it has been edited out, perhaps with the idea that if people think they only have one life, they'll behave better. or they're sort of, they'll focus on this life rather than thinking, oh, well, I've got some more, I'll leave it till then. So it's a fundamental tenet of Jewish mysticism, and was standard in their teaching to about the 19th century. So I think, there was a survey, there was a study a couple of years ago by the Global Research Society and the Institute for Social Research. I was looking at this online. So they studied 18,000 people in 23 different countries. And they found that 51% of people believed in reincarnation. 23% of people believed that after this lifetime they will cease to exist. And 26% didn't know, which I would say is probably, I would have thought they would have been higher. And the people who did believe, most of those were in Hungary, Brazil, Mexico, Japan, Argentina, and Australia. Okay, which was surprising. Those who really didn't believe, the highest numbers were in South Korea, Spain, France, and Belgium. And those who didn't know were us lot in Europe and Asia. So you wonder the don't knows if they just haven't given it much thought or if they really, hands up, don't know. But what I did find interesting as I was reading this study is that half of all the people studied said they did believe in a supreme being or God. So just to throw that in as an interest statement, because I thought that was quite interesting. I would have thought it would have been lower than that. So that was quite good. So reincarnation, we're starting to... it's increasing. It's becoming a more accepted concept. Even if you look in mainstream culture, say when I listen to my kids or even the words of songs and things, karma and reincarnation are coming into mainstream culture. And even 10 years ago, it was probably a less accepted concept, I would say, in my experience, than it is now. So it is becoming increasingly questioned, thought about, accepted. And what I want to talk tonight about, what sort of sparked the reason for doing this talk and this topic, was in lockdown, I've been rereading a lot of my books because the library's not open. And I went back to books I read, in my 20s, years and years ago, by Dr. Brian Weiss, W-E-I-S-S. And he basically, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, it's backwards. Okay. He was a psychiatrist in America, and he held quite a prominent position. He was a graduate of Columbia and Yale Medical School, chairman of the psychiatry department, etc., etc., and predominantly used mainstream psychiatry when working with his patients. And then what happened was he had a patient called Catherine, And this is what the book Many Lives, Many Masters is about. And what happened with this patient, Catherine, is she had a lot of quite serious, serious anxiety and various issues going on for her that no traditional psychiatry could heal or go near. And he saw her for a long time. And so he thought, right, well, why don't I hypnotize her and take her back through her childhood and see if we can find, maybe she's got suppressed and blocked issues going on in her subconscious mind that are often the key to healing. And psychotherapy and psychiatrists use this. And he got quite a surprise when Catherine flipped back into a previous life and started to describe things in this life that at first he was skeptical, and then later on after the session he went back and he could verify some of the things that she was saying, and he knew that she didn't have any knowledge or even a belief in any of this in her current lifetime as Catherine. And he started working with her over years, and she went back into numerous lifetimes. And some of them, she would speak languages that she couldn't speak in this lifetime, or she would give facts. And she was able to recognize people from her current life that were incarnated with her in these previous lives in different relationships. Sometimes her mother was a tutor, or her father was a son, or, you know, because the idea is that we tend to reincarnate with a soul group. So the people very close to us doesn't have to be your immediate family. It can be people who are in your close circle in this life. You may have known through many lives because you have karmic interactions and entanglements with those souls. And so he, and then what started happening, it got even more interesting. In between, sometimes he would take her through each life, and he would ask her to go to the significant events in that life, and then he'd ask her to go to the end of that life, and she would experience the death that she experienced in that life, because sometimes the way that we die can be the key to our fears and phobias in this life. So he was sort of looking for that in healing. And what would happen is she would go into the state between lives, and she would describe this state, and she would describe it in the same way that many people who have had out-of-body experiences have described it. She would describe it as, you know, a tunnel and a light and a place of love. And then when she was in this between life state, she started bringing through information that wasn't her. She was tuning into what she called masters, and bringing through just these, her voice would change, and her manner would change, and her personality would change. And she would bring through information purely for Dr. Weiss. And what it was information about how it all works, about that we go into a place where we have a life review process, and we decide what things still need addressing, and the process of going back into another life and choosing parents and choosing situations that will help us to develop certain qualities and to work through some karma and all of this. And he was also skeptical about this until one session where one of these masters started talking to him about the death of his son, and had information that no one knew, and was reassuring him about his son, but also new things that he knew nobody knew. And his wife is a psychiatrist as well, and I think it sort of threw them both when this information that was quite personal started coming through. So he sat on this for a few years, and started looking at research online and other psychiatrists and stuff, and started realizing that there's actually quite quite a bit of documented evidence of people doing past life regression for healing, and people, you know, going into these lives. And so he sat on this for a while because he knew that in mainstream medicine, this would potentially ruin his career. And he had quite a prominent position. He knew it might ruin his livelihood. It was a real risk. But he also knew that he needed to publish this information. And this is where he wrote. I mean, I've got 3 of his books here, and they're quite interesting because they give you so, you know, he gives so many examples from so many patients. In fact, one of the books, my favorite, Only Love is Real, he winds up with 2 patients quite separately start talking about these past lives, and they're looking for their soulmate, and he starts to realize that they're looking for each other. And that they start describing the same events in the same lives, and he's like, oops. And so he doesn't know whether to keep them apart, to organize getting them together, to leave it to fate. So that's quite an interesting story. And then the book I'm reading at the moment, one of his, is where he starts to take people into future lives to heal this one. And you're like, trying to get your head around that idea, but they haven't happened yet. And that's where it starts to really expand your mind, because this idea that time is linear, well, time is only linear in our experience in this realm. Because the other question that was asked through these books, and he said many people ask him, well, how can there be so many souls in incarnation, like 7 billion souls in incarnation now? Where were they all before when we had fewer souls on the planet? And he's like, these masters are saying there are many dimensions. And it's like, okay. So it starts getting very, sort of almost the concept of other dimensions, other realms, parallel universes, this sort of thing all starts coming into question. So the books are interesting in that they challenge, for me, I read them in my 20s, and it was the first time I'd met something that really, really, reincarnation was right there, and I couldn't deny what I was reading. And it just seemed to make sense. It seemed to me that everything else in the universe was cyclic. Why wouldn't we be? Do you know what I mean? It just seems strange that we would just have one lifetime, one shot at it, when really, compared to universal timescales, it's such a short life. 3 score years and 10 is not a lot of years in the grand scheme of things, to have a human experience. So I would urge you to read those books if you haven't read them already, or if you're like me, you read them years ago, because what I also found is rereading them, because I have moved in my understanding, I got a lot more out of them now than when I first read them. So it was quite nice to go back and read them. But what the reason I wanted to do this talk is, if we have lived and died many, many, many times before, why do we still fear death so much? And this really, that there's much written that says all fear, all human fears are ultimately a fear of death, a fear of no longer existing, of not being important, and just being obliterated, if you like. So a fear that we don't carry on. So if we believe in reincarnation, why do we still fear death to the point that often people don't live because they fear death? Why does this belief not encourage us to live? If we could hold the idea that we're going to die when we're going to die, and that's, our soul is in charge of that, if you like, or our soul determines that it will happen when it happens, why don't we just live life to the full? I'm not saying we go and jump off buildings and test it out, but why do we live with, the constant fear. And also the other question I put to you, many people who've had a very close shave with death, who've either, died and had an out-of-body experience and watched medical staff working on their body and felt themselves pulled back in, or people who have developed a terminal illness and come back from a diagnosis that wasn't good. Often that experience sparks a real change in their attitude to life. They start to really live their life. They let go a lot of the things in life that are not important, and they focus on the things that are important, because they knew in that moment of coming right up to death, right up and facing death, they knew what was important. And they knew that, whether your house was hoovered today, or whether your bank balance is whatever, or whether you have a fast car, really didn't matter. What mattered was the people that you touched, the relationships you built, the life that you lived. And so I just want to pose these questions just to get you thinking about reincarnation, just to get you thinking, well, what do I really believe? Do I truly believe that I have lived before? There's many documented cases of small children, sort of before school age, before about 4, it suggested that the veil between your previous lives, especially your last life and this one, is a bit thinner. So sometimes children, young children, or even children who haven't been out in the world much, will start talking about past lives, or sometimes in their play, when they're acting out, they're acting out previous lives. And there's been cases of children being able to identify characters who you can then look up in history books, or identify events that happened, or in some cases tell police where bodies are because they have been in touch with these past lives. So I'm just posing lots of questions for your contemplation, really. I know myself, I have worked with my past lives in this lifetime, and it was quite by accident that a friend of mine who is a hypnotherapist was the same thing, was taking me back, looking for things in my childhood, and I flipped into a quite horrific last life. And I'm aware of about 3 or 4 lives that have a common thread running through them that has become a main part of the healing for me in this life. And it has really helped to see the events in this life. Why does this always happen to me? Why is that happening to me? Why is that happening to me? But when you go back into a previous life or a couple of previous lives, you start, oh, that's why that's happening. That's bringing up that for my healing. Of course, that was going to happen. It had to run a thread. And you start to see a bigger picture. So that was not something I looked to do. It was something that just happened almost spontaneously, and occasionally has happened just when I'm on my own in a deep meditation, and it does catch you by surprise, but it's so vivid. It's not like a dream or an imaginary thing at all. It's as real as sitting here. Okay, so I just wanted to pose some questions about reincarnation. I want you to just look at your life and look at the fears and look at your belief. Do you believe on an intellectual level that you are immortal, that your soul, your higher self, your essence lives on through countless lives and experiences? Or do you truly believe and know that? Or is that just an intellectual construct that you kind of, yeah, that makes sense, but you haven't gone there in terms of, okay, well, what does this mean for me? And you know, sometimes when events happen to especially our personality and we're really struggling to understand what's going on, sometimes the roots of that are in previous lives. Sometimes the roots of people's illnesses can be found in previous lives. And it can be, you know, it can be a back problem was because you had a sword in your back in a previous life. It can be as literal as that. It can be the reasons why sometimes you clash with people in your family. You know, there's real just personality clashes right from day one, and that clash seems to go on for a lot of years. It can be why you wind up entangled with certain people for many years, and you seem to feel like, oh, I just want to be free of this person. Why am I still having to deal with this person? And it's like, well, because if you don't do it now, you'll be doing it in the next one. I think it also helps if you do hold a belief in reincarnation. It changes your actions because I'm thinking about my son who messaged me today, and a friend had done something quite horrible, and he was very upset and he was very angry and full of retaliation and plans for revenge, and I'm like, no, stop. Let the anger go. Get rid of the emotion, but don't take any action until you've returned to a place of peace, because, you know, it's not up to you to, if you like, karma will sort this one out. That person has to live in their own head. Their conscience, people have consciences, and sometimes if you just leave people, you don't create the conflict and the argument. That gives them something to focus on, and they don't have to listen to their conscience. Whereas if you just leave it sometimes and they don't get the reaction from you that they were looking for, and you go away and heal whatever it's brought up for you, because the anger it's brought up for you is something that needs healing, and you just leave that, they have to sit in their conscience then. And the human conscience is a very tenacious thing. It doesn't let us get away with much. Unless someone has a real personality disorder where they're totally removed from that conscience, most people, it comes back in this life. You know, it's there. And if not, it will come round again. And it also means that you take responsibility for your own life and behavior, but you're not responsible for other people's lives and behaviors. That's theirs. And if they don't sort of behave in a way that's right, good and true in this lifetime, they will have to learn to in another. And that's not up to us. Okay, we are just responsible for us. And that includes our reaction to what happens. So I was trying to say to him, yes, get rid of the anger, because you know, you just got to get that out of your system. But don't take any action until you've come back to a place of peace, because there'll be something going on here that is a bigger picture, and you won't be able to see what that is until you come back, you return to love, and you return to a place of peace. So it's an idea. I think a belief in reincarnation changes the way that we behave. And this brings up the sort of Buddhist concept of living harmlessly. And to live harmlessly in thought, intention, and deed, extremely hard to do, but possible. You know, there are many people on the planet who do live harmlessly, who follow this and work at this as a lifetime's work. And it also, I think it helps if you are feeling reactive, to just step back. Okay, this might not be the full picture. This might not be just in this lifetime. This may be a conflict that this person and I have had over many lifetimes. This might be karma. I might be needing to learn in this lifetime to behave differently to how I've behaved before. It might be that I need to not react and leave that person so that they can have the opportunity to behave differently in this lifetime. And so I guess a belief in reincarnation also helps us to realize we may not be seeing the full picture. And also it's there for our healing. You know, maybe we do want to investigate the full picture. And, you know, you can go to people who will regress you into past lives if you want to. Many past life issues come through in the astrology chart. You can get two people's astrology chart and see the entanglement between them to get an indication of the karma between those two souls, for example. And sometimes if you got like a really difficult relationship with someone, and I remember Ted saying to me, I have never seen two souls so entangled. You just got to work through the karma. I'm like, right, okay. That helps. Do you see what I mean? It helps. It's like, how can it be like this? That's how it can be like this. So reincarnation and the fear of death. We're going to die. We've died many times before. Maybe we fear the actual process because we know that some of those times it wasn't very pleasant. You know, we may have suffered. Maybe it's the suffering we fear. But it's written in some of the Alice Bailey work that eventually we will come to a point where we celebrate the death of a person like we celebrate birth now. We celebrate death as the release out of the physical, out of this school for the soul that coming down into incarnation is, because it's a release for the soul, and they go into that place of love where they, you know, they get to review the life. And we will see birth as not such a celebration, like we're here again. Okay, I didn't do it last time. I haven't sorted it all. And obviously the concept that eventually we can progress to a place spiritually where we no longer need to reincarnate in this particular school for souls. Maybe we go on to another one. Maybe we take the choice of becoming what's called the Bodhisattva, where some souls who don't need to reincarnate anymore stay within the realm of the earth to help other souls. So that's it's a path of service and sacrifice. So I just wanted to pose some questions for you to ponder, because really once we no longer fear dying, we start really living. Okay, we're going to die. We don't know if it's tomorrow, and we don't know if it's 20, 30, 40 years from now. But we could live every single moment of that time without that fear, because we've done it before. We've done it lots of times before, lots and lots and lots of times before. It's suggested that, I remember a talk by Ted, I think it was, really you live about 700 lives before you start waking up. It's 770 and 7. So you live 700 lives just gaining experience as a human being. Okay, just living life, many lifetimes. You'll come back as different races, different sexes, different eras, getting all kinds of wealth of experience. And then there's about 70 lives where you start to sort of go on a path, what they call a path of return, and you start to really start working on a higher spiritual level, start healing some of the issues from their lives, start doing some emotional healing, that type of thing. And then the last 7 are where you're really tested. And those are the ones that, those last 7 lives are the ones where you're dealing with all that's come from the other 777, if you like. Now, those are just arbitrary numbers, but it's just to give you an idea it also, I think, helps if people are having particularly challenging lives, that just one challenge after another. It might be that you're on one of the latter lives. People who are having an easier time may be in easier lives between the hard lives, because that was one of the other things in the Brian Weiss books, is these masters said, you know, not every life will be a difficult one. If you have a really challenging one, you might get an easy one just to have a bit of a break. And so some people here might be having their break life and other people are having their challenging life. So it just changes the way we see it. So I just thought it's a really interesting concept to think about, and just to challenge yourself on, especially, you know, are you living, or is your life kind of affected by the fear that this is the only one you have, and when it finishes, you finish. And I'll leave you there to have a bit of a think and a ponder, and we can come back to questions after the meditation, which I'm sure you'll have some really good comments and some really good questions, which I may or may not be able to answer, but we'll have a go. Right, let's have a meditation. So get yourself comfortable. Good. So make sure that you're comfortable, sitting upright. And I just want you to begin by just lifting your shoulders. So breathe in and then let them come down. Hopefully, let's do that again. Just helps to stimulate the vagus nerve. So it'll just help you to relax into the meditation. So you want your feet flat on the floor, your hands comfortably in your lap, and your body reasonably upright. So just before we say the affirmation of love, I just want you to come into this moment. I want you to let go everything that I've been talking about. Just let it go. You can come back to it. And just come into an awareness of the here and now in this room. And I want you to just give yourself permission for the next half an hour or so. We're going to work as a group. We're going to work together and come together. Like countless other groups throughout the world are coming together. And just work in group meditation. Now just repeat either out loud or quietly to yourself the affirmation of love that will just open our heart chakra and bring us into a space of the heart. In the center of all love I stand. From that center I, the soul, will outward move. From that center I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. Now just gently close your eyes. And just come into an awareness of your body. So just noticing your body sitting on the chair. Noticing the clothes on your skin. I want you to imagine that you're sending roots down into the earth, either through your feet or through the base of your spine. Just grounding your energy. Now just let sounds come in. Just letting this moment be as it is. And now take your awareness to your breath. So just focusing on the breath coming into your body. Focusing on the breath leaving your body. And as you feel your body beginning to relax, I want you to imagine that you're opening a channel right down through the very center of you as you breathe. So taking the breath down into your belly. Just with a gentle focus on the breath. Now keeping that focus, let the breath take you into a very quiet, peaceful place deep inside of you. So thoughts still run in your mind, they come into your mind and they pass through, but your focus is on the breath. Now occasionally you will follow a train of thought and be distracted. As soon as you realize this has happened, come back to the breath, but come back without judgment or criticism. The important thing is coming back. And this is all part of the meditation. Now I invite you to bring your awareness to the heart center, in the center of your chest. And just feel like you're breathing into your heart. And the heart center is slowly expanding, filling with light and love. And I invite you to fill it with compassion. So compassion for all of humanity who are down here living lives, many lives, that are often quite challenging. So let your heart fill with this compassion. This is a human experience that we are having. And as you go deep into an awareness of your heart center, allow it to connect to your soul or your higher self through your heart. Now I want you to imagine that you are bringing white or violet, purple or gold light down from your higher self, and it is pouring into your body through the crown of your head. And it is flowing down into the major energy centers or chakras in your body, the 7 major centers. Bringing them into beautiful alignment. And as they come into alignment, I want you to imagine your heart as a vessel to receive and distribute this light and love and compassion throughout your whole body. So your whole physical body is filling with this purifying, cleansing, healing light. Bringing coordination and integration of all parts of you. Bringing healing. And a sense of connection to all of humanity and to all living things. Now imagine this light, this love, this compassion flowing down through your whole body. Is flowing out into the energy field that surrounds your body, the aura. So that you are filled with light and love, and especially compassion throughout your being. Compassion and understanding for what it is to be human incarnated down on earth. Now, as your energy field fills with light and love and compassion, let it flow out into your home. Let it touch the hearts and minds of all of those who live in close proximity to you. Continue to let it flow out into your street, your neighborhood. Let it flow out into your community, your town, your city. And let this light flowing through you and radiating out from you join the light of all of those in this group meditation, both live and through the recording, and all other groups who are working in this way. And let us fill this nation with light and love and compassion. Together, let us fill this part of the world. Let it flow and radiate out. Let it fill this hemisphere. and flow out to encompass the whole world. Imagine people all over the world working in groups so that our planet becomes surrounded by a beautiful light. And in this light are the qualities of understanding and inspiration, of love, unconditional, and especially of compassion. Imagine you can see our planet surrounded by this light and see it flowing down in to heal and restore the balance in nature, to heal our planet herself, so that our air is clean and fresh. Our waters are restored, they're pure and clear. We have a healthy ozone layer. The animal and plant life is flourishing, and mankind lives in harmony with the natural environment. Now see or feel this light flow into the hearts and minds of all of mankind. Bringing peace, igniting goodwill, and restoring right relations within each individual, between individuals, between families and communities and nations. Envisage this light lifting our awareness, igniting a conscious awareness in the hearts and minds of many, raising the collective consciousness so that we can live in peace and in harmony. I want you to allow your imagination to envision a world based on unity, where people don't just know we are one as an intellectual concept, but they live from this place that my brother or my sister and I are one, that I am my brother or my sister's keeper. And no man is an island unto himself. This week is World Unity Week. I want you to envisage and imagine a world based on unity. Right relations, truth, beauty, and goodness at the heart of all aspects of human living. Continue to hold a space in your heart for this energy to pour through your body, joining with all other bodies and radiating out. Continue to hold a space. And now we're going to use the Great Invocation as a vehicle to distribute light and love and the will to good into the hearts and minds of all peoples. So either silently or out loud, we're going to repeat this together. So repeat each stanza with conviction. And we'll pause between each stanza just to imagine the power and effects of the words as they play out. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Ooh. Ooh. And then slowly coming back into an awareness of your body. And just coming back into the room, opening your eyes when you're ready. That was a very powerful meditation. I could feel that energy. Right, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question, or you want to contribute, or you want to just make a comment. And I'll put you so I can see you all. Lovely. Oh, it's nice to see you. It's nice to see you in your garden. So, any questions for a start? Bernie, go for it. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm 70 years this year, and I really enjoyed this thing about reincarnation. But I still get anxious about death, mainly because it's the ultimate lack of control. It's the ultimate lack of certainty. Who if they are reincarnated, what would be reincarnated as? Why don't we remember previous lives? That's a big question.
Mm.
And when do we know we're dead? It's
Well,
like
my understanding is that often when you first die, you don't realize you're dead because you die in stages, if you like. So it still seems like you are living in the life that you are.
reminds me to death. Claudio says in Measure for Measure, to die we go not where, to lie in cold obstruction and to rot, and to be at the mercy of the pendant winds. It's this uncertainty. Do we meet our mum and dad? Is it oblivion? Is there reincarnation? It's all these questions that makes me feel really anxious.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you an experience I had when my second son was born. It was a difficult birth and a bit tricky, and I hemorrhaged. And they thought they were going to lose me. And I remember seeing my husband at the time had my son and being completely calm, even though I just had a baby. On some level, I knew that I was in trouble. And I went to a place where there was an amazing light. It was, I suppose, like a tunnel. It wasn't defined. And I've never known such overwhelming love. I didn't consider my two sons, my newborn and my toddler, my husband, my life here. There was no sadness. There was no, it was just love. And next thing I know, I'm waking up in a hospital bed, really confused. And I'll be honest with you, a little bit angry that I was here. Because where I had been so incredibly loving, and that I had no fear. So I guess that experience, I hadn't read about experiences back then. I've read about people having similar experiences. I didn't lift up and see my body or anything like that, but that feeling of love has never left me. And so I don't fear dying. I probably fear leaving my kids without a mum, and maybe I haven't done my job in that way. I haven't helped as many people as I can or given all I can. But definitely that has helped me. And you can read about other people having that experience many, many times. And that can help to alleviate those fears. In terms of reincarnation, I think the reason we are not aware of previous lives is, can you imagine suddenly being aware of 700 lives? How on earth? Do you know what I mean? We have enough trouble dealing with this one. How would we? I do believe we become aware of them when we need to. I do believe if we want to seek awareness. And I also believe that perhaps the ones that come up, and this would be played out in these books I've been reading, just the truly significant ones that you've still got things to work through in this life tend to come up. So I understand those fears. And I think as you get further on in years in this life, that fear of death and of things ending, I think sometimes for me, it's the fear of leaving people as I've known them in this life. But if I know I'm going to see them again, even though I won't remember, I will still, what we feel in here we will remember on a heart level. So I think it's for each of us to tackle this one. But if my experience, both my personal experience in reading these books and sort of looking at helps, that's my aim, because really I would like people to not fear death. I'm not saying, like I say, you get a diagnosis of a serious illness and you just ignore it. I'm not saying that at all. But know that you have faced this fear so many times before. It's not a new fear. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's just that when we separate from our loved ones and go to our next incarnation, how can we be happy because we're separated from the people we love? I mean, it is reassuring when you say we're reincarnated. We could be reincarnated with our loved ones, but then we're a different ego. We're a different person. So
but you think about that connection with the people that you love. It's still there. You think about people who have already left. Your love for them hasn't changed. It's still with you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? We take the love with us. So you might not see them every day, but how you feel and how they made you feel doesn't change. That stays with you forever. You'll always feel that love.
Yeah. Even though you're different, you might come back as a spider,
No. My understanding is that you come back in, while you're here, you come back as a human. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want that reassurance. But it's a process of reassurance, isn't it?
It is, totally, and it's a tricky subject. It's
nobody wants to talk about it.
Nobody wants to talk about the biggest fear that's kind of this black wolf in the room. Do you know what I mean? And I think the more we talk about it, I can remember my son went through a stage, and I think it's quite common. I think he was about 12 or 13, and he went through a real fear of death stage. And he was asking me a lot of questions. He was waking up at night. It must be a developmental stage where children really realize. And his biggest fear was of me dying. So I managed to find a video. It's in my bookshelf somewhere, that just was a depiction of what happens when you die. And you went into this place where you went through a healing and a life review. And then there was a sort of a talking about when you were going to reincarnate and what kind of parents and body. And he, even though probably now he would be less open to that idea, at the time it really helped that I was prepared to talk about it, because the fears, when you get the fears, when you make them conscious, they're not working away. Do you know what I mean? When you talk about it, and that I could show him something that just gave him an idea that maybe you don't end, and maybe we do go on, and maybe we do come back together in groups, in our soul group, or our, the same group of people. And I do know that it gave him peace. So I think it's something we need to talk about. We really do. And I know that many people, when they're terminally ill and they're dying, they want to talk to their loved ones and talk about this and talk about, their fears. And quite often we don't do that till the very last moment. And it's a shame. It's a shame, because if we embraced it, it could get to the stage where a person says, I mean, it is written that we will get to the stage where we can choose when we go. It can be an active choice where we just choose that the soul is going to depart. I don't know much about that, but I have read that is something that more advanced civilizations have learned to do. And it becomes a celebration. Yeah. Because the person is passing over to a place of love. So I want it to be a topic that isn't taboo, that we talk about. Great, Paula, you're off. Go and ponder, yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Have I given you a lot to think about?
I haven't said anything because what I've got to say is probably quite challenging.
Good.
But I mean, I have very strong, clear memories of life before birth anyway,
Yeah.
and I always have had. And so for me, the question of life after death has never even been a question.
No.
And I used to talk about it frequently as a child, and I almost got sectioned because of it. And and so I had a very, very strong warning, you know, as a boy, never talk about this, otherwise you're going to end up in a mental hospital.
Yeah.
So do you see what I mean? So we're living in a culture even now where people's perceptions are so strongly formed that even things like this, where there's evidence everywhere, people can be ostracized for even having this kind of belief.
Yeah.
So I'd say to Bernie, you have nothing to worry about. You'll find it the most peaceful thing and the most enlightening thing imaginable, because consciousness is folded so many times to incarnate that all of a sudden it's just like the veil is lifted, and so it's not something to be afraid of.
No.
It's like, imagine it as a rest in between, you know, being in a theatre.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've been on a theatre, you've played your part as best you can, and then you have your rest, and then everybody else kind of joins up afterwards and talks about it. So it's basically part of a process. Nothing ever ends. Things just transition between. If you imagine a dolphin swimming through the water, and it jumps out into the air, and it goes back into the water, and it jumps out into the air. At the moment you're in the water, you know, in 10 years' time you could be in the air. It's just part of a process.
Yeah. And do you choose your, it's a lack of choice that worries me. Do you choose how or where or the person reincarnated to?
Yes. Think of it like this. If you think about the components of your personality and character, then when you're on the other side, these things are much clearer to you. And so you start to get an idea of what life lessons you need to refine your character. And so on the other side, people cooperate. Well, everybody cooperates, and lives are formed. It's so natural. It happens very, very easily. And so the major events in your life are predetermined and pre-agreed by you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So you do have a say. I mean, that was interesting in these books I've been talking about. He would ask the question of the person in hypnosis, what was the major lesson you needed to learn from this life? What did you learn? And in most lives, there's just one major lesson. Sometimes we get really keen and we're doing several lessons, or sometimes in a lifetime, and this is a very controversial thing to say, you can almost have skipped to the next life's lessons in this life.
Right. Interesting. No, yeah. I mean, I'm a gay man, so I just think in a previous life I might have been married with 8 kids, and it was so overwhelming. I want to come back. I don't want any kids in the next life, you know. So I try to rationalise my.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah. And I'm not, you know, I was wonderful.
You may have already done a lot of parenting in previous lives and learned everything you needed to. Do you know what I mean? You don't know. You don't.
And we let somebody else speak. I'm sorry to dominate.
No, not at all. No, it's valuable. I want to open up a discussion on a topic that people don't talk about. Because, you know, we don't talk about death, and yet, we want to talk about death.
Yeah.
We'll get to the stage eventually where we're so comfortable with death, and it's written that it's not that far off where we will lose our fear of death. And when we do, we will be able to work with the person who's transiting and use sound and vibration and all sorts of part of a ceremony to help that transition be a beautiful smooth transition, and we will eventually have almost like a death process where we really help that person transition, so it won't be such a shock. Because I think sometimes because we don't talk about death, and because we avoid it to the last, we're ill prepared. Do you know what I mean? And we have to prepare. We do it on our own instead of a loving group of souls here helping us transition, because they're happy for us to go. They know that they'll see us again. They know it's loving. It's a, you know, we've reached a point where we've done everything we needed to do in this lifetime. We've graduated, if you like. It's a celebration. And so there'll be an easing of that process. So it won't be so scary, because it won't be such a shock to go from here to the next transition, to the next stage.
And also, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, my auntie died. And if you think about it, she was 88 and her body was worn out. For someone like that, it's a merciful release, and I think probably they're glad to get gone. Yeah. So I think this kind of here we have, certainly with the medical profession, we have this kind of sanctity of life thing where people are kind of kept alive for as long as possible. But I think it's all about quality of life, and I think keeping someone alive on a machine for a year is actually not a good thing.
No, I would agree.
Say goodbye to somebody. I mean, this is the cruel thing about COVID-19. You separated from the people who are dying, and to me, that's the cruelest thing. You can't say goodbye.
Yeah, that has been a very challenging part of this whole pandemic, is people who haven't been able to be there when their loved ones are transiting and haven't been able to have the kind of funeral that helps with that whole healing and grief process. Yeah, definitely. Right. I'm going to end it there and say, go and live the rest of your evening with lots of joy, embrace life, and I will see you next week.